Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, and welcome to the very first episode of Your Family Tree Answers. I am so excited to bring this to you. It is going to be a lot of fun. Well, I'm planning on having a lot of fun. You guys can join in too if you like. I hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. I am a genealogist with Your Family Tree Detective, where we help you dig around your family tree and uncover the truth behind those myths and legends. So, what are we talking about today? So, each week we are going to be coming on at 12 noon Mountain Time, and we are going to be answering some questions about researching your family tree. We're going to show you hints and tips to get around stumbling blocks, places you can go to find information, questions that we have asked for you prior to send us in, and we are still asking for your questions. Send your questions to us, and that way we can keep the library going and build up the library so that you can come in and check out some tips and tricks on finding things in your family tree. But today we are going to start with a very important topic, and that is all about telling your story. Why is it important to tell your story? And when we get this basis down, next week we're going to start looking at how to start researching your family tree. But for today, we're going to start with you and your story and why it is important. Oh my gosh, just think about it this way. How many times have you heard grandparents or parents say, in our day, and you're thinking, oh no, here we go again. We have another one of those. In our day, we walked uphill both ways to school in the snow, in bare feet. And you go, you've heard the story 1,000 times. Well, those are the stories that bring history alive for us. When we can have a personal connection to a place in time, it makes it more alive for us. So today we're going to look at why it is important to tell your story. And the other thing that we have is that people turn, why do I need to tell my story? It's not worth writing. It's boring. Well, when we tell our story, we're connecting the future with their past, which is our today. Think about that. We're connecting the future with their past, which is our today. We will not be around in 100, 200 years from now for them to ask us questions about the life that we lived in the timeline that we lived in. You know, what was it like to live in the here and now? What was our world like? Where were we when some event happened? How did it affect us? What did we feel about it? And yes, you can find books, you can find the historic books that talk about those times in newspaper articles. You can find vital certificates, which is your birth, your marriage, and your death certificates. You can find other documentation like census reports that show people where their ancestors were living. You got land deeds and military records, wills and testaments, coroner's report, and a whole bunch of other types of documents that you have access to that will give you a picture of what your ancestor was like, well, what your ancestor lived through, what they did, but it's missing a very important piece. It's not giving you the whole picture. It gives you the facts. It doesn't tell you what their reactions were, what their feelings were, what their thoughts were at the time. That's the stuff that makes it real and makes it personal. Other people may tell stories from their perspective, which is fine, and you get to read them. But what about your family's perspective? This is what gives us the personal connection to our past and makes those historical events come alive for us. Oh, think about that. And that not only does it make historical events come alive for us, it teaches us what it was like to live in their dash. And you're going, dash? What does a dash have to do with it? Think about it. You have your birth date and you have your death date, and in between is the dash. And the question is, how full is your dash going to be? What happened in your dash that you can pass on to future generations? When you want to tell them, hey, I lived through 9/11. This is where I was. This was my reaction. This is how I found out about it. This is how it affected me work-wise. This is how it affected me personally. Whether or not you had people who were in the buildings that were hit or on the planes that were flying that day. Whether or not you were one of the first responders there, what were those moments like for you? Start talking about them, start writing them down, because this is where it becomes important for your future generations to know more about you and who you were at this point in time. And you may think, they don't need to know that. Yeah, they do. Trust me. I mean, how many times have you sat and listened? One of my favorite times with my grandparents, I know I'm jumping all over the place. One of my favorite times with my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my aunts and my uncles, even my own parents, is listening to the stories of what it was like when they grew up and the things that they went through. I had grandparents and great-grandparents that were involved in World War I and World War II. Do you know how much I would love to go back to my great-grandfather who fought in World War II? He was a captain of a fort back there in Wellington in New Zealand. What was it like to be there in that time? What was it like to be in charge of that fort that overlooked the harbour entrance into the Wellington harbour? To talk with those ancestors that actually went over to Europe and fought in the war. What was that like? What were their experiences? Now, my grandfather had a very traumatic experience over there, and he never talked about his days in the war. My grandmother couldn't shut her up. But I loved hearing their stories. My favorite storybooks in the entire world is photo albums. And you might go, wait, what? Photo albums to me are the best storybooks around. Because if you sit down with somebody who knows who was in those photographs, when those photographs were taken, where they were taken, how they fit into the family tree, you have a real live storybook with photo albums. You can flip through, and you probably, if you haven't seen them, they're the ones with the black paper, with the black and white photographs, with the little black corners on the black and white photographs that hold them in place, maybe the white pencil writing underneath them. There may be stuff written on the back of the photograph, but these are our family stories. They are the best storybooks around. And if you can sit down with somebody who knows what's in there and record that time, then you have that recording with those photographs for forever. There's different ways that you can save things and have backups of backups of backups, so that those stories are never lost for future generations. It is such a valuable time. Imagine sitting down with a storybook. I mean, my parents put together for me one year a photo album of my life from when I was born all the way through up until I think like the year before they gave me the album. And to sit there and to go back through there and the memories it generated, the thoughts, the feelings about different times. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Oh, that's really cool. But what's really good now is I can share those stories and that storybook with grandchildren. I mean, how cool is that? If they come to you, Grandma, can you read us your story? How cool would that be? So there's all different ways. And when you connect it with a time in history, that event becomes more personal and you're more likely to go out and learn more about that event in history than if you were assigned it at school to go research. But if you can then turn around and take a homework assignment on an event. Now think about this. This is going to get some people. If you can look at a particular time in history, you're given an assignment to write about, about the assassination of JFK, John F. Kennedy. You're given an assignment to research that and write a thing about it. What if you went to your parents and your grandparents and go, were you alive at that time? Where were you? What were your thoughts about this? You've now put a personal connection in there. So if maybe your parents were in the crowd there when he was actually shot. You never know unless you ask. Think about these things. Think about who in your family would have been around during that time and go and ask them details about it if they're willing to talk about it and get it recorded. I like carrying around my little digital recorder here. It's great. Yes, I carry pen and paper with me. Yes, I have my phone with me. But this grabs the voice. This grabs the video. And sometimes they may not be comfortable with the video, but they may be comfortable with sitting with this there. And that's fine too. But we're going to talk more about these tools on next week's episode about when it comes to interviewing family members and things. But think about things like, how many siblings do you have? Where in the birth order are you? I'm the oldest of 3. I have 2 younger brothers. What are their names? When were they born? Are they married? What are their spouses' names? Are they single? Do they have any kids? Those sorts of questions. Where did you live? Where did you go to school? And these first 3 questions are some of the basic questions that we actually have on a list of 100 questions for interviewing relatives. Now, you don't have to go through all of them. And again, we'll find out more about those next week. But in the description of this video is a link. And if you click that link and fill in your name and your email address, we will send you a list of those 100 interview questions free of charge. But anyway, so back to the thing, think about other things. And I was just sitting here yesterday when I was preparing for today going, what sort of things are not on that 100 list that would be really good questions to ask? And there was things like, what was it like to live through the global pause and how did it affect you? Now, the global pause is the name I have for the COVID pandemic. To me, it is a global pause. Somebody picked up the remote, hit the pause button, and you know this, you're busy, you're flailing through life, and you're just sort of like, oh my gosh, I just want to hit pause and take time to breathe, catch up, and then get back into life again. To me, this is what the pandemic represented. It became a global pause. Somebody hit the pause on life, and we were all able to step back and go, for me, it was a big breakthrough for me. Yes, I know there was people panicking and everything else. For me, it was a chance to just sit back and go, reevaluate everything that I was going through at the time, what I was doing, where I was, and making plans to move forward. Hey, I was actually in the travel industry before this, and somebody had asked me a very important question, and he was a business coach of mine, and he said to me, and this was back in 2018 or 2019, I can't remember which, but it was towards the beginning of the year. It was like February, March of 2018, 2019. And the question he asked me, he says, I just want your initial gut reaction. Whatever pops into your head immediately, that is the word I want. I went, okay. He said, if travel was to go away tomorrow, what would you do? I immediately, without hesitation, went genealogy. I've been doing genealogy for years. I had never had it as a business. It has been a huge passion of mine for over 40 years. In fact, over 45 years. It's been a huge passion of mine, finding out how I fit into a family tree. What was a family tree? I didn't even know. What does it mean to have the first time I heard a cousin removed, I was sort of like, oh, in fact, I can tell you this. I was in my teenage years, I was watching an episode of Dukes of Hazzard, and Uncle Jesse was telling Bo and Luke that they were going to be having like a second cousin 5 times removed or something like that. And I remember sitting there going, 5 times removed? What the heck did they do to get kicked out of the family 5 times? And the family let them back in. What the heck's that all about? That was my initial reaction to hearing cousin times removed. And it wasn't until a few years later when I actually started diving deeper into genealogy that I actually learned what those terms meant. And they will be coming up in other episodes. So I thought, okay, so we've got this list of 100. What other things? So what was it like living during the global pause or the pandemic, if you want to call it that? And how did it affect you? How did it affect your work? How did it affect your daily life? What was it like? What emotions were you going through? The next question, have you lived through a natural disaster like earthquakes, hurricanes, volcano eruptions, tsunamis? What was it like? Did you fear for your life? Did you lose anybody? Did anybody pass in our family because of that event? Did you lose everything? Was everything going to be okay? When did you know everything was going to be okay? Did anybody in the family go missing during that time? What was it like? Where were you when 9/11 happened? That one we've already talked about. What thoughts raced through your head? Where were you when the planes hit the towers or the Pentagon or crashed in Pennsylvania? Were you a first responder that day? That would be an interesting one to talk with. Were you in one of the buildings that were hit or nearby? Did you have any family members or friends who were killed that day or were missing? How did the events of that affect you personally? Me, I was asleep when all the planes hit. I had come off night shift at the hotel. I did the night auditor's role that night, and I came off the night shift. I was in bed asleep. My husband, as he was driving to work that day, we lived in Northern Virginia, so he's going around the southern side of the Beltway to the southeast DC, and he saw the smoke go up when the plane hit the Pentagon. And by the time he got and he worked at the Naval Research Lab, and by the time he got there, they were all locked down. All the computers were basically turned off, but they fed the CNN feed through all the monitors so everybody could see what was happening. They weren't allowed to leave till like around 2:00 in the afternoon, I think it was. I ended up having to go into work early, and I called Brad to say, ask him when he was going to be home, because we had some paperwork that had to be signed. I thought, well, if he brings home the paperwork, I can leave early. I can go over to FedEx. I can drop the paperwork off, so it will go out today. It will get there tomorrow, and then I can carry on to work and all of that. Well, that all went out the window as soon as 9/11 happened. So I called him to ask him about that, and that's how I found out about what was happening. At first, I thought it was a movie. He says, just turn the TV on. And at first, I thought it was a movie. And then I started channel changing, and it was on like every single channel. And it was sort of like, dang. And so then my day went from there. And yes, I have written about it. I have written it all down. Where were you when Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech? Were you there in DC to witness it? Or did you watch it, hear it on the radio or on the TV? What did you think of that speech? What did you think of the whole march that they did? Did you participate? Have you ever been in DC for any of the presidential inaugurations? What was it like to be there? What feelings were coursing through you? Where were you in DC when you were watching this? Were you one of the crowd on the mall? Were you up on some of the steps there at the Capitol? Where were you when that was all taking place? Royal weddings. Where were you? Were you there in London when they were, and I'm talking about the English-British family royal weddings. Were you there in London along one of the parade routes? Did you get to, see them go past in their carriages? What was that experience like? Did you sit at home and watch it on TV? I can tell you, I watched Princess Anne get married to Captain Mark Phillips on TV. A few years later, I watched Prince Charles and Lady Diana get married. Then I watched, who was next? Andrew and Fergie, and then Edward and Sophie. And then there was nothing until William and Kate got married, and then Harry and Meghan. So I've watched all of those ones on TV. Those are the only royal weddings I have watched live at the time that they were happening on TV. Being part of the Commonwealth, you kind of come from New Zealand. I'm part of the Commonwealth. It's kind of a thing to do. But it was to me, it was just amazing, the pomp and circumstances, the whole thing with all of the beautiful the dressed horses, the carriages. Oh my gosh, the carriages were gorgeous. Seeing those, watching the people's reactions, their faces and everything. Where were you when Princess Diana was killed in the car crash? How did you hear about it? Did you watch the funeral? What were your thoughts about that? I watched her funeral, and I watched Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mum's funeral. I watched Prince Philip's funeral earlier this year. Have I seen any other royal funerals? No, those are the only ones. But it was just all the ceremony and the pageantry that surrounded it. It was just, and it was still an emotional roller coaster for me. Have you ever met anyone famous? Where did you meet them? How did you meet them? Did you work with them? How did the death of a celebrity or a famous person affect you? I will tell you this. I am a huge Sean Connery fan, a huge Roger Moore. I am a huge James Bond nut. I am a James Bond nut. And when Roger Moore died, I don't know what it is, but when certain people pass away, I react in different ways. So when Roger Moore passed, I have not seen another movie I have not seen a movie that he did since he passed. Well, I have not watched any of the movies he had done since he passed. Now, that still doesn't come out right. After he died, I haven't watched any of his movies. And the same with Sean Connery. November is, everybody, those that know me know that November is my James Bond month. We are in November of 2021. I have not watched one James Bond movie. Why have I not watched one James Bond movie? Because the very first James Bond movie is Dr. No, starring Sean Connery. Since he passed, I have not watched any of his movies. I, for whatever reason, right now, can't bring myself to watch a movie that he was in. He was such an incredible actor with a lot of talent. And when I watch those movies, it evokes an emotional reaction within me of he will never make any further movies. And the same with Roger Moore. Patrick Swayze, another one. I only just, about a month ago, watched Dirty Dancing for the first time in years. It's the only Patrick Swayze movie I have watched since he passed. Who else is there? Oh, there was a theater actor who I loved watching when I was a kid. I got his first album when it came out. I absolutely loved listening to him sing. He was the longest running Phantom of the Opera in history. He was based in Australia and all that. I got to see him on stage in Phantom. He was absolutely amazing. I hadn't seen him on stage in I think it was 11 or 13 years I'd worked out when I saw him, when I've last seen him on stage in New Zealand to when I saw him in Phantom. And then he suddenly passed away. I can't bring myself to listen to any of his music. It's just how I am. So when celebrities pass, if it's a favorite singer, a favorite actor, some other sort of celebrity type person, how do you handle that? How has it affected you? Did you ever serve in the military? Which branch of the military did you serve in? Were you ever deployed to any overseas assignments, either during war or during peace times? What was that like? What was it like being away from your family? What were the experiences that you had there? If you were over there fighting a battle, fighting wars and stuff, what was that like? How did that affect you? What was your homecoming like? And for those that you had left behind, your family members that had left behind, what was it like for them? If you were somebody who had sent your loved one off, be it a son, a daughter, a wife, a husband, a friend, a cousin, how was it for you when they went off to war and you weren't sure you were ever going to see them again? What was that like for you? What was the toughest challenges you faced while they were away? And then what was it like, what experiences did you have? And then what was it like when they came home? What was homecoming like? Were you raised around the military? So did you have somebody who was in the military? So did you have were your parents involved in the military and they were off on deployment? Were you moving a lot because you were a military brat? In New Zealand, you don't have to be just a military brat to get moved around a lot. Your father could be a policeman, he could be a fireman. There are different jobs within New Zealand in those first responder / military roles that get moved around a lot. That's how I ended up living in so many places in New Zealand and attending 9 schools, because my dad was first a fireman, then was a policeman. And we got moved around a bit. What careers or jobs have you had? The careers or jobs that you have, were any of them your dream career or job? Why did you choose what you chose? Why did you choose what you chose? Yeah, why did you choose the job or the career that you did? Did you follow your dreams into your dream career or thing? What are some of the accomplishments that you had at work? What were some of the accomplishments that you had? Did you own your own business? Or do you own your own business? How you find it? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you have learned with your business through the failures, actually we call them breakdowns, through the breakdowns and the breakthroughs? What have you done to overcome those challenges in owning your own business? What were your biggest wins? Have you ever attended any major sporting events? And we're talking Super Bowl for American football. We're talking Olympic Games, summer or winter, Commonwealth Games for those that belong to the Commonwealth countries, World Cups, and that's in soccer and cricket and rugby league and rugby sevens and what are some of the other ones? Basically any sporting event that has a World Series or Cup surrounding it. Have you attended the finales of any of those? What was it like to be there? Did you sit at home and watch it? Did you have a party? What was it like? Did your favorite team or person win or lose? Were you actually on one of those teams, or were that athlete that was participating in that sporting event? What was it like for you? If you made it to the Olympic Games, either the summer or winter, or the Commonwealth Games, if you made it to any of those games, what was that moment like when you actually arrived and you're getting ready to compete? And, how did your competition go? You were up against the best of the best. What was that doing to you psychologically? What was it like? Did you actually get to stand on the podium at the end? What was that feeling like? Think about things like this. Did you win or lose? How did it feel? If you were the spectator, what was it like for you to be sitting in the audience watching your favorite athletes perform? Whether it was a team sport or an individual sport, what was that moment like for you? If they won, what did you feel? How did you feel? How did that make you feel? If they lost, how did that make you feel? Who was your favorite athlete? So, and I ran out of a list. So those are just some of the things that you can think about to tell your story. Look at times through history. Go to on this day in history. There's websites you can go to and look, what happened on this day in history, and go and have a look, because most of them will start at way back at the earliest date that they can possibly have, and bring you forward to the most current dates within the last few years. Have a look through those lists. Do you remember any of those events? Did you participate in them in some way? Hurricane Katrina, I was working for Marriott International at the time, and one of the things I volunteered for was to go up to headquarters and sit for a day on a telephone trying to contact Marriott family members, the Marriott associates that were based in around the New Orleans area, and finding out where they were, where we could send them their paycheck, where we could send their paychecks to, what other resources did they need, letting them know what resources we had available to assist them. Did they want to come back and work for Marriott? Where they could go to apply for a job? Did they want a job immediately, or were they willing to wait for the hotels in New Orleans to open back up again? So we had a list of questions to go through with them, and get their contact, find out what was the best contact information for them, for mailing address, phone numbers. Most of the people were with relatives in Texas, and we had different job fairs going on in the main areas where most of the people had gone to, so that people could go in and find work immediately. For those that wanted to get back to work immediately, they were able to do that. For those that wanted to wait for a little bit and see what happened in New Orleans with the hotels openings and things, then they were able to do that as well. But it gave them a place where they could go and they could talk to people from the head office and find out what's going on. They got help with resources and stuff, getting them, with getting house, with all sorts of things. They got help with resources. I mean, Marriott was on the ball with that one. I don't know about other companies and stuff. I just know for the company that I was working with at the time, they were on the ball. So, look back through history. What happened on this day in history? And look back through that time and think about, did I know about this? Yes, I knew about this. Oh, I actually participated and never thought of that one. Think of charities. What charities have you supported over the years? For those that do the runs or the walks for different charities, what got you involved with it? How many of those events did you participate in? How much money did you help raise? These are things that help fill in the gaps on those dashes for future generations when they look back at this time to find out more about you. You might think your life is boring. Start looking through some of the events in history that's taken place. Where were you when those events were taking place? What were your thoughts about the events at the time? And that's just basically it. So if you would like a copy of the 100 questions that you can ask, you can even go through them yourselves, all for that. So there's a list of 100 interview questions about life, none except for the sporting events and stuff. This is just the basic information. If you'd like a free copy of that, go to the link that is in the description here. Click on that link, provide us with your name and your email address, and we will email that list over to you straight away. Go through the list yourself first. Answer the questions for yourself. Then you can come back again and watch this video and get the other questions that we've started throwing in there as well. Maybe I'll type those ones up too. Who knows? We might add that on to next week's giveaway. But think about, historical events, so go through that list, answer the questions for yourselves. And then next week, we will talk about how to take those same 100 questions and interview living relatives with those. So that's, if you want to get that list, it's in the description below us down here. Click the link, and we'll send that list over to you straight away. And we will be back at 12 noon Mountain Time next week for episode 2. And episode 2 will be, I do interviewing them, or it'll either be interviewing living relatives, or it will be how to start your family tree. In fact, I might do how to start your family tree first next week. So next week we'll talk about how to start your family tree, what information you need to get started, and just how to start that. And it will also incorporate how to interview living relatives too. So we'll be covering both of those next week. But if you have any questions that you would like us to answer for you, please contact me. You can private message me through Facebook. I'm easy to find. I'm the only Helen Brums on Facebook, so I'm really easy to find. I don't know if YouTube has a messaging system. Well, you can private message comments, can't you? Leave notes in the comments. Would love to hear your feedback on what you think of today's show. Love to hear any questions that you have, so we could use them for future episodes. So that is it from us today. Hope you have a super fantastic sparkling day. Go out there, explore your life. What have you done? What have you accomplished? What have you seen? What have you witnessed? What were your thoughts and feelings about those times? And start writing them down. And you don't have to write if you don't want to. You could pick up one of these and talk into it when you're out walking the dog or out riding your bike or whatever, or driving. I have a little pouch that I tighten up the neck thing on so that this sits right here. So when I'm driving Sparkles, which is my RV, when I'm driving Sparkles, it sits here and I can talk into it while I drive. I usually end up talking to myself anyway, so why not record it? Go figure. Anyway, have a super fantastic sparkling rest of your day, and we will catch you on episode 2. Hei konera.